you so much for joining us on a spooky edition of The Podyssey, a podcast by Gordon State students. I'm your podcast host, Michael Sanders. Today, we'll be listening to a story written by Chamberlain. In this tale, we follow the story of a young woman named Jess. She's just like anyone else. She goes to work, has one or two close friends, but things are not what they seem in her town. We'll be entering a world where you can't trust your senses. Dreams and reality collide. Your life has a purpose, but it might not be what you thought or want in this tale called Skin.
She sits alone at a table in an empty cafe. She's the only patron, and she might have thought that she was the only person in the building at all if it weren't for the soft conversation between the waitress and the chef that she can barely hear coming from the back corner of the kitchen. She stares out of the window to look at the bright, sunny sky in hopes that she won't have to wait for much longer before she spots the person she's supposed to be meeting. Charlie is her closest friend, her only friend, really, and they meet for lunch every Wednesday afternoon to catch up with one another. These conversations are mostly filled with stories that come from Charlie's busy life while Jess just sits and listens. This may actually explain why Charlie is late today, but it is a bit strange nonetheless. You see, Charlie's always been very punctual, and if she ever is late, she normally gives a heads up, but maybe things have been extra busy today. Now that Jess is thinking about it, her friend's lateness is not the only strange thing going on right now. The cafe is normally bustling with people, and after noticing this, the quiet has become very unsettling, and the conversation from earlier has disappeared entirely. She reaches for her phone to check the time, maybe send Charlie an inquisitive text to see what the holdup is, when all of a sudden she hears the ring of the door opening. She snaps her head up and sees Charlie walking in, absolutely soaked to the bone.
Jess, hi. I'm sorry I'm so late. The rain helped me up a bit. I hope you weren't waiting for too long.
Jess looks her friend up and down, watching as her hair and clothes drip onto the floor. Charlie takes her seat on the other side of the table across from Jess, who turns to stare out of the window again. It's storming hard. She sees lightning strike in the distance behind the buildings on the other side of the street. Funny, just a second ago, she could have sworn she had seen clear, blue skies. No, it's fine. I haven't been waiting for too long. But you must be hungry. Charlie emphatically nods her head.
Starving.
The waitress seems to appear out of nowhere to take their order, and it's not long before their food arrives and they are deep in conversation about Charlie's latest work drama.
I've never wanted to punch anyone in the face so badly until that moment.
Jess laughs at Charlie's story, but she's already forgotten who the story was about. In fact, she seems to have forgotten much more than that. She looks down at her empty plate. What was it that she had again? She typically orders a soup at this particular restaurant, but she's staring at a plate with smeared ketchup all over it. Maybe she tried something new, but how could she have already forgotten? She looks up to ask Charlie about it, but something moving in the kitchen catches her eye. The kitchen is visible to the whole room, sitting right behind the counter, because they're in a diner, not a cafe. But she could have sworn. No, they were definitely in a cafe earlier. She remembers the cute flowers they had hanging from the ceiling, and the soft, yellow lighting that came from the overhead lights. And now, the girls are shrouded in bright, white lights and the smell of bacon. But how could they have gotten here? Jess, thinking she is losing her mind, finally looks up at Charlie, only to realize that she is already staring at her. Charlie?
They're coming for you, you know.
Jess just stares at her. They sit in silence for a moment as she wills Charlie to say something else. Maybe offer an explanation or break out into a huge grin when she admits that this is all just a really creepy prank. But all she gets is silence. What? Jess continues to stare as Charlie looks out of the window, tapping her fingers on the table along to a song that only she can hear.
They're coming for you.
I don't know what you're talking about, Charlie. The corner of her mouth lifts into a smirk as she keeps her eyes trained on something on the other side of the window.
Yes, you do. You know who they are, and you also know that they've been watching you for a long time.
Jess shakes her head. No, I really don't have any idea who you're talking about. Who's been watching me?
Oh, come on. You know who. Look, they're even watching you right now.
Jess whips her head around to look out of the window, but sees no one outside. In fact, she doesn't see anything at all. No people, no animals, no streets, no buildings, just miles and miles of barren land. This is not right. She turns her head back to question her friend more, but quickly comes to a stop as she watches Charlie reach up to touch the top of her cheek, right underneath her eye, and start peeling her skin off. She does it like it's natural. Jess is frozen and can do nothing but watch as her friend's skin peels off her face like it's liquid latex.
It's your turn, Jess. They want you, and they're finally coming for you.
Jess pushes away from the table and stumbles to the door. Charlie doesn't move to follow her, but she keeps talking.
You can't hide, Jess. They're going to find you, no matter what you try to do. There is no stopping this.
Jess pulls and pulls on the door, but it won't open. Charlie's crazed laughter gets louder in her ears, and they start ringing. A microwave beeps, and it sounds so far away, but it just won't stop, and... Jess snaps her eyes open as she sits up in her bed. She turns off her phone's alarm and breathes a sigh of relief. She looks around as she tries to comfort herself and calm her racing heart. As she finally looks at the time, she thinks that it's time to start getting ready for her shift at the diner, which just so happens to be the same diner of her already fading dream. Jess has been texting Charlie with every spare minute she has, and nothing seems amiss. Not that anything would be amiss, of course. She has already buried that dream in the back of her mind and hopes to forget about it soon. But before that, it doesn't hurt to make sure that Charlie is still the same Charlie that she had been pre-dream. Now, working in the dream diner from the hours of 2 to midnight did not do much to help her forget said dream. But it is safe to say that with her shift over and Charlie checked on, her nerves have substantially calmed down since waking up earlier that day. And with her shift over, she can finally go back to the comfort of her own home and do her best to have a nightmare-free sleep. She walks out to her truck, and as soon as she manages to start it up, radio static comes blaring through the speakers. Jess slaps her hand over her ears on reflex before she fumbles to turn the radio down and then off completely. Once the silence settles her racing heart, she buckles up and drives away. Jess has never been the biggest fan of the hustle and bustle of the city, so her house is a bit secluded from the rest of the world. She has to take back roads through the woods in order to get home from work, so for a while she drives peacefully in silence. The roads are clear when all of a sudden a big animal runs out of the woods, heading straight for her truck. Jess swerves out of the way, narrowly missing it. She slows down and tries to catch her breath when she notices the static on the radio again. She must have bumped into the power button when she swerved. She reaches to turn it off, but all of a sudden, a man's voice comes over the speaker. Strange, considering there is never any reception this far from the city.
And you're listening to TCFY Radio. I know better than anybody how scary it can be when you're driving alone in the middle of the night, just waiting to arrive at your destination. That's why I do this, in the hopes that I can provide a bit of comfort to those lonely travelers and maybe even help find some solace in the dead of night. There's actually one specific listener that I would like to give a small shout out to. Jess, if you're listening, which I know you are, just know that you're not alone.
Jess's heart stops beating for a second before she starts to frantically hit the power button on the radio.
Oh, come on, Jess. You know you can't get rid of me. And you most certainly can't get rid of them.
The radio cuts out and static fills the car once again. She thinks about pulling over, maybe giving someone a call, but she thinks that the best course of action would be to get home as fast as possible. This can't be real. There has to be some other Jess. Or maybe this was all just a really elaborate prank. On a different Jess, of course, because Charlie would never do this to her, and her parents don't care for practical jokes. This was all just a creepy coincidence. Her mind is running a mile a minute, and she's so focused on her thoughts that she has stopped paying attention to the road. She doesn't notice the person standing in front of her truck until it's too late to do anything except swerve to the right and smash directly into a tree. Jess smashes her head into the steering wheel, and the only thought that she has is that the pain of the crash is too real for this to be another nightmare. It takes her a moment before she realizes that the front of her truck is smoking. She needs to get out and call the police, and find anyone who can help her. She reaches for the door handle, but it's ripped from her grasp before she can open it herself. Her vision is blurry, but she thinks she sees a woman standing in front of her. She feels hands on her arms as she's pulled out of the car and onto the ground. The woman who pulled her out is speaking to her, but she can't comprehend anything that she's saying. She tries to take some deep breaths, but her lungs feel like they're on fire. The woman puts her hands on either side of Jess's face and forces her to look up.
Hey, sweetie, are you alright?
The woman has a kind voice. Jess nods her head, or at least she thinks she does.
Good, that's good. Let's get you up.
The woman pulls Jess to her feet. She's slowly gaining her senses back and starts looking around to get a better sense of her surroundings. It looks like the woman pulled her a few feet away from her truck after pulling her out of it. They're pretty close to the road. She looks around to see if she can spot the nice woman's car. She must have watched the crash and pulled over to help her. Maybe she also saw the person standing in the road. But as Jess looks around, she sees no car other than her truck smashed against a tree. That's weird, she thinks. How are we getting to the hospital?
Oh, honey, we're not going to a hospital. We're not going anywhere.
Jess looks up at the woman. She knows she didn't say anything out loud. Or maybe she did. She can't really remember. What do you mean? The woman's grip on Jess's bicep tightens as she pulls her along, deeper into the woods.
You heard me. You don't need a hospital. I mean, you don't even have any open wounds. What you need to do is come with me.
Jess stops in her tracks. She has a terrible feeling and thinks that she needs to leave immediately. She tries to jerk her arm free, but the woman has a vice-like grip on her. It takes all of Jess's remaining strength to kick the woman's legs out from under her before she can finally make a run for it. She runs back towards the road, hoping to find a car to flag down. She almost makes it back to her now flaming truck before she is tackled to the ground from behind.
You can't escape me, girl! And you can't escape us!
Jess tries to get up, but the woman is using her body weight to hold her down on the ground. They grapple with each other as she tries to get her arms free, but the woman is stronger. Jess finally knees her in the stomach, which ends up freeing one of her arms. She reaches behind her for anything that might be able to help her get this woman off when her hand latches around a big rock. She uses it to hit the woman right in her temple, effectively knocking her off of Jess. Jess then scrambles to her feet and makes her way to the road. There's a car pulled over a little ways down from her burning truck. She jogs up to the car, but starts slowing down when she sees 4 people getting out. "Excuse me," Jess waves her hands in the air. "Can you guys help me? I crashed my truck and there's this crazy woman in the woods who's trying to hurt me. And I know that sounds insane, but I swear..." She cuts herself off abruptly when the 4 people from the car walk up to her. Illuminated by the light of the fire, she can now see that these 4 strangers are 4 women. Women who look identical to the woman from the woods. She begins to back away, but the women walking towards her speed up. She spins on her heel to make a break for it, but when she turns around, all she sees is more of the same woman, dozens of them, and they have her surrounded. Jess's breathing becomes short and shallow as she sinks to the ground. There's nowhere for her to run. They've blocked all possible escape routes.
We've been waiting for this moment for a while, you know.
The original woman speaks as she emerges from the woods. There's a cut on her head from when Jess hit her with the rock, but it's not bleeding. Her skin is open, but there seems to be nothing underneath. The woman notices what Jess is looking at and reaches up to touch her head. She then digs her fingers into her wound and starts tearing off her skin, just like Charlie did in her dream.
We tried to warn you. We really did. But you could never take a hint, could you?
Jess can do nothing but watch as the woman keeps ripping off her skin, the other women following her lead. There's another face underneath that layer of skin, like they were wearing a mask. The faces of these women, their true faces, look nothing like they're supposed to. Their features are spaced out too much. They have holes for noses, and their mouths are on their chins, and their eyes, they're on their forehead, and they're shaped like cat's eyes, and they're pitch black.
We've had our fun with this skin, but she was getting too boring. Plus, it's been so long that people are starting to recognize us. But you, Jess, you're a nobody. Your skin could last us decades. And who's going to miss you? Charlie? Your parents? Ha! They won't even know you're gone. Now, if you'll just sit still, please. This is going to hurt.
In a last-ditch effort, Jess tries to get on her feet, but those things grab onto every part of her body to hold her in place. She feels a pinch right under her hairline, and then all she feels is fire. It doesn't take long for her to pass out. The last thing that she hears is,
"Let's try her on, shall we?"
so much for listening once again. This podcast was written by Caitlin Chamberlain and features Caitlin Chamberlain, Elizabeth Hill, and Michael Sanders. Audio engineering, recording, and editing by me, Michael Sanders. Intro and outro music written by me, Michael Sanders. Executive producer, Noel Thrasher. And as always, Highlanders forward. Keep reading, gang.